Our reporter, Zaina Hodder, defied a media ban to enter Daraa and sent us this story.
This is a city draped in black and a city raging with anger. For the past week, Daraa has been burying their dead. Demonstrators killed while clashing with security forces. Dozens are believed to have died. People here say at least 150, far higher than the figure of 37 provided by the state.
The corporate media tells us the civil war in Syria began after Bashar al-Assad's troops killed Arab Spring protesters in Daraa and other cities. The truth, however, is something different. In fact, it's the exact opposite of what the official narrative would have us believe. The conflict that has so far cost more than 400,000 Syrian lives began in Daraa, a town near the border with Jordan. According to the media, the revolt began in March 2011 after teenagers were arrested for anti-Assad graffiti. Daraa citizens were outraged and poured into the streets to protest, and this was met with a violent response by the government. A Daraa journalist, quoted by CNN, said the protests were the flame of a revolution that would spread across the country. Syrians took inspiration from the so-called Arab Spring revolts in Egypt and Tunisia. According to Syrian journalist Stephen Sahuni, the uprising was staged by foreigners. Jihadi mercenaries supported by the United States and NATO and Libya were in Daraa well before the protests. In addition to Libyans, members of the Muslim Brotherhood worked out of the Omari Mosque in Daraa. The plan they prepared was engineered by the CIA just over the border in Jordan. Weapons were stockpiled at a mosque well before the demonstrations. Muslim Brotherhood provocateurs attacked Syrian security forces during the demonstrations in Daraa, Aleppo, Damascus, and other cities.
So there was violence right at the beginning.
Violence. Yes. And the Syrian security forces had orders from the Syrian president that to not use a gun. They had only sticks in their hand only. And tens of Syrian police, Syrian security forces were knifed, stabbed, and beaten either by knives or rocks or sticks. And some of them have died, martyred.
At the very beginning, in Latakia, the crowds would come out on a Friday after the noon prayer. This was like the habit. And so they would come out and they'd start, we want freedom, we want democracy, we want blah, blah, blah. Okay, then the police, of course, would be there around in anticipation. And at the beginning, the police did have weapons. But if you fire on a policeman or a soldier, his training will be to fire back. That's his training. Okay, so that's what they did. They fired on the security forces, whether they be city policemen or army. They fired on them knowing that they're going to get a reply. And as many dead, innocent civilians protesting in the street, this is furthering their cause. Right. This is what they want. So this happened. Then the president came out with an order nationwide saying the security forces can still go and watch the protests, but they cannot carry a weapon.
And that caused
this caused many, many deaths because they followed the orders, but the people were the protesters slaughtered the policemen.
In reality, the uprising in Daraa in March 2011 was not fueled by graffiti written by teenagers, and there were no disgruntled parents demanding their children be freed. It was part of a Hollywood-style script written by skilled CIA agents who were given a mission to destroy Syria for the purpose of regime change. The violence in Daraa escalated when rooftop snipers killed demonstrators, police, and soldiers. Observers blamed the deaths on Assad, but there is evidence the snipers were part of an effort to push the opposition's narrative of a brutal government that must be overthrown. The tactic was also used in Ukraine during the State Department's engineered coup. Similar tactics were used in Romania, Bosnia, Thailand, Egypt, Libya, and as part of the CIA's and NATO's Operation Gladio and its strategy of tension in Europe. According to Sihoni's research, weapons smuggled into Syria came from the CIA, stationed in Jordan, where the U.S. has a good relationship with trusted client King Abdullah. After the fall of Gaddafi in Libya, the CIA sent weapons seized in the country to Syria. Details on weapons transfers came out during the Benghazi hearings. The investigative journalist Seymour Hersh reported on the CIA's rat line to get weapons into Syria.
Very early in 2012, when I don't know why, but maybe because of the hubris of the victory we thought we had in Libya, ousting Gaddafi, which is a mess of its own, we set up a very secret operation inside Libya to funnel arms through Turkey into the Syrian opposition, including all sides, those who were secular, those who had legitimate grievances against the Assad government, and the other groups sponsored by the Saudis and the Qataris, who are really trying to create a Wahhabi or Salafist government in Syria, take it over. And this was a very secret operation that went for a long time. It only ended when the consulate in Benghazi was overrun. And it was done without, as I write, without telling Congress.
The CIA also worked with the newly formed Free Syrian Army in Aleppo. The FSA invited foreign jihadists to join the fight against Assad. They streamed in from Turkey, where they had arrived from Afghanistan, Europe, Australia, and North Africa with Turkish and Saudi assistance. Senator John McCain, a staunch neocon, took up the cause of the FSA in Congress and went so far as to enter Syria without a passport.
America's leading advocate of intervention in the Syrian crisis spent about an hour in the country, having crossed over the Turkish border. He met with leaders, senior officials of the Free Syrian Army, and they talked about matters that have been close to John McCain's heart these last few months or so, namely arming of the Syrian rebels, airstrikes and possibility of those, and the creation of a no-fly zone.
By 2012, the CIA was operating out of Turkey, providing weapons and sending fighters over the border into Syria. It provided satellite imagery and other detailed intelligence on Syrian troop locations and movements. The agency also set up an intelligence service for the Free Syrian Army. In the late 1940s, the CIA began covert operations in Syria after Syrians rejected an oil pipeline in their country. The United States also had issues with anti-Western sentiment and a large communist party. CIA operatives met with military leaders in Damascus and plotted to overthrow a 3-year-old democratically elected civilian government. It backed the Nationalist Party during the election in 1947. 2 years later, the CIA sponsored a military coup. During a BBC interview in 1967, CIA agent Miles Copeland admitted as much.
The State Department practically asked not to be informed in this case. We did inform the State Department, and as you've read the book, you know this case where simply it was hinted to us that we had best shut up about what was happening in the country, and if Hosni Zaim, the case in point, you are talking about
the Syrian case, when we overthrew the Syrian government.
If Hosni Zaim wanted to have a coup, and if his intention was to get rid of the corrupt government and establish a democratic government, we should leave him alone and stay out of it.
And that was the State Department policy, but in fact, you very largely organized, directed it, I mean you personally, but you're among the team who did it, organized and directed this coup.
Exactly.
In 1957, the CIA and MI6 planned another coup in Syria and the assassination of 3 top Syrian leaders. Documents revealed in 2003 spell out the details of the plan, including an invasion in response to manufactured border incidents and internal disruptions inside the country, including agitating the Shia Druze minority. Frontier incidents and border clashes would be staged to provide a pretext for Iraq and Jordanian military intervention. According to the CIA and MI6, Syria had to be made to appear as the sponsor of plots, sabotage, and violence directed against neighboring governments. In the United States, the effort was led by Kermit Roosevelt, the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt led the coup that overthrew the democratically elected government of Iran in 1953. The plot was abandoned, however, when Jordan, Iraq, and Turkey refused to cooperate. The following year, the Baathists took power and embraced the pan-Arab nationalism of General Nasser in Egypt. In 2011, it was revealed that the State Department financed Syrian political opposition groups and related projects, including a satellite TV channel that sent anti-government programming into the country. Barada TV began broadcasting in 2009. It is closely affiliated with the Movement for Justice and Development, a London-based network of Syrian exiles associated with the Muslim Brotherhood. The link was mentioned in a diplomatic cable sent from the U.S. Embassy in Damascus in July 2009. Reuters reported the Salafist leadership attempting to overthrow Assad is comprised primarily of Muslim Brotherhood operatives. The command structure was established by the U.S., Britain, France, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Turkey. The Syrian National Council, originally the face of the Western-backed opposition, was dominated behind the scenes by the Brotherhood. In 2012, the CIA used the organization to smuggle weapons into Syria over the southern border of Turkey. According to Miles Copeland, the CIA began cooperating with the Muslim Brotherhood in 1955. Saeed Ramadan, the son-in-law of the founder of the Brotherhood, was a longtime CIA and British intelligence asset, according to the Swiss. That same year, British intelligence used the Brotherhood to agitate against the government in Syria after it announced a desire to merge with Egypt.
The flags of Egypt and Syria fly side by side in Cairo as the two Arab nations merge. Presidents al-Kawatli of Syria and Nasser of Egypt lead in the political joining of the two states that are separated geographically by Israel.
The Muslim Brotherhood became an important asset after Nasser announced the Egyptian takeover of the Suez and talked about a collective Arab security pact within the framework of the Arab League. After the Ba'athist coup in 1963, the Brotherhood recruited Sunni Islamists to confront the government. The Islamists killed Syrian civilians, off-duty security personnel, and security forces. The violence reached a climax in 1982 when Hafez al-Assad besieged the town of Hama for 27 days in order to put down an uprising by the Muslim Brotherhood. Between 10 and 40,000 Syrian citizens were killed and the city destroyed. After 30 years of exile, the Muslim Brotherhood was back in business in Syria during the Arab Spring.
الإخوانية إلى سوريا الإخوانية إلى غزة إلى مصر إلى ليبيا إلى تونس إلى المغرب، وهنالك صراع على سوريا أيضا من أجل أن تكتمل إمبراطورية الإخوان المسلمين، وهنالك أيضا فرع لهم في العراق. الآن إخوان المسلمين بدل أن يكون حزب إسلامي أصبح حزب سني.
Representatives of the brothers traveled to Turkey to join other opposition groups based outside the country in setting up the Syrian National Council. Although the Free Syrian Army was portrayed in the West as secular and moderate, it was actually controlled by the brothers and other radical Wahhabi Salafists. In 2013, the Free Syrian Army said it welcomed al-Qaeda in the fight to depose Assad. The plan envisioned for the Arab and Muslim Middle East was spelled out in a U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency document from 2012. The document says Salafist groups, the Muslim Brotherhood, and al-Qaeda in Iraq, now known as the Islamic State, are at the forefront of the effort to depose Assad. The Pentagon document predicts the establishment of a declared or undeclared Salafist principality in Syria.
Our top story, new declassified reports have revealed that Washington had prior information about the presence of Takfiri terrorists in Syria and their plan to establish their so-called Islamic State in the heart of the Middle East. The U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency's documents, which date back to 2012 and have been published by an American monitoring group, have shed light on the rise of the Takfiri terrorists and their activities in Syria. Based on the papers, Washington saw the rise of the ISIL as an effective tool to implement the West's policies in the region and to isolate the Syrian government of President Bashar al-Assad. The documents also predicted that the support given by the West, Turkey, and the Persian Gulf Arab states to the Takfiri militants would eventually lead to the establishment of, quote, a Salafist principality in eastern Syria.
Bashar al-Assad and a secular Syrian government stand in the way of the endgame the U.S., Israel, Saudi Arabia, and the Sunni Gulf Emirates have in mind for the Arab world. That endgame, spelled out in the 1990s by the neocons, envisions a Middle East balkanized along religious, tribal, and political lines. If you find the geopolitical report informative, please consider making a contribution to NewsBud. We are 100% people funded and don't take money from corporate advertisers, establishment foundations, or NGOs. With your support and encouragement, we'll continue to bring you news and information ignored and blacklisted by the corporate media. Thank you for your support.